Welcome back, everybody. It's time again for another episode of Letters to God. The one show, maybe the only show that tries to show you a way to connect whatever's out there. Try and reach over, see if anybody's really listening, as we hope you are each and every week. As we talk about the most amazing stories and most amazing examples and ideas of maybe, just maybe, we should all send a letter to God. The man who's got the direct address, Dr. Trin, he knows where to send those letters.
It's not to the North Pole.
It's not?
Yeah. Welcome, Rick. Awesome.
Yeah, bring in your guest here. Introduce yourself, Rick. Here we've got Rick, or is it Ornelas?
Ornelas, yes, correct.
Ornelas, who is, I don't know if you still are, Rick. You're in the consulting, coaching world of business and have now, you're now a best-selling author and started a movement, I believe.
Yes, yeah, correct. So first off, thank you, Paul and Dr. Trin, for having me on the show. It's honor and pleasure to be here. I heard my sister Liz on your show a few weeks back, and I was like, hey, they're speaking my language. I need to talk to these two guys.
Yeah, so, good. All right.
So I appreciate the opportunity.
So give us some background. What do you do, and what did you start?
So as Dr. Trin was saying, I've worked in the consulting and coaching industry for the past 6 years. Originally working with doctors of all types on the leadership and business side of their practice. So coaching them through the business areas. Unfortunately, sorry, Dr. Trin, a lot of docs are great on the clinical side, but they're not such great business people, you know, with regards to running a practice.
Absolutely.
So I'm getting a thumbs up. So I guess you agree. So that's where I came in. And then last year, when my work had slowed down and I found myself with a lot of time, I decided to write a book that had been in my head for 20 years since a major car accident, which I can share that story later. But and then as a result of that, I went through an intense period of spiritual awakening, and that's when I decided to write my book and create I Spark Change, which is the movement Dr. Trin was talking about, which is our mission is to spread positive change, to empower others, and give them a community to elevate their social impact and make the world a better place.
What a wonderful idea. So let's unpack some of that. And then you wrote the book. Let's give one last plug here. You wrote a book called what? 12 Hours of Heaven? Is that what it is?
Yes, it's 12 Hours of Heaven, Lessons for a Better World. Came out last October. And like Dr. Trin said, it's been very well received and people really enjoy it.
Well, you are the poster child for this show here. We all feel, particularly during the lockdown and the craziness as we were talking about before, I thought COVID's going away. We're all walking around like it's done. The masks are off. Everywhere I go, people are just living life again here like it doesn't even exist. And yet it hasn't gone away. Who knows what's going to happen as the flu season returns and we all get back indoors. And I don't know, is this just the new normal we're living under? And if so, how do we handle the stress and strain? Don't we need some sort of awakening of something here? What do you think about all that happened in your life?
Yeah, I agree. I agree, Paul. I do think we need that. People need some type of awakening, and we're constantly bombarded, and we have been for the past 18, 19 months, bombarded with the negativity of the news, painting this gloom picture of the world in which we live in.
Yep.
And that's the unfortunate thing, because if you look at some of the statistics, and I do a ton of research for building this community, and if you look at some of the statistics, we're living in the most prosperous time in humanity. We're living in the healthiest time in humanity, COVID aside, right? The access to medical care is the best that it's ever been in history. Across the world, we have more access to things like clean water and food and everything more than any other else. Crime rates are down.
Longevity's gone up. We've got some diseases on the run here. Yeah, right. That should be.
All of those things. But people feel like the world is coming to an end, right? People are saying, it's the signs of the apocalypse and all these atrocities. And yes, there are terrible things that are happening. the reality is that we have to, as human beings, we have to do our part. We have to do our part to do God's work on this world, and to spread some love, to serve others, to help others, and make that world, our world, a better place. Because it's not just going to do it on its own. And that's where people need to
talk about that,
up.
Dr. Trin, because that's your life's work. Tongue out, let's roll up our sleeves, let's stick our tongues out, let's check, let's help, let's work. And yet, so many, and I'm not a member of the evangelical community, as I always say, I'm a good Irish Catholic here, so a little more traditional. But even in my church, there's so many people that are just waiting for God to do all this. We're always just sitting back saying, I don't need a vaccine. I'm protected by, divine coverage here. I don't need to do anything. I just have to pray. That's all I have to do. And magically, everything goes away. Is that the way it works, Dr. Trin? You got a different view.
What are the steps to sparking change?
Yeah.
Is it initially just taking action? Is it a buy-in of a mindset that occurs first?
Or is it a belief that you have to take action and that you can make a change? So many of us think, I don't have to do anything. And even if I did, I don't think it'd make any difference.
Does the mindset follow the action, or the action follows the mindset, Rick?
I think it's a little bit of everything that you two have just mentioned, right? And for certain people, it's one versus the other. For some people, they have the mindset first, and they're like, okay, now I need to take action, and something is going to spur that action. Whereas for others, they have to get involved and see that others are doing it, see that social proof, kind of get in the feeling, and then like, oh, hey, that's gonna change their mindset. So there's really no set answer there. But to answer your question about sparking change, it really begins inside. It really begins with each individual saying, okay, if I'm going to change this world, and that's where maybe a little more mindset. If I'm going to change this world or make things better for myself or anyone else, then I have to do something. I can't just wait for, God or the government or some entity to do it for me. That you have to start. And then by virtue of doing that, the second thing is, it doesn't have to be big, tiny, microscopic, what people might not even consider doing, spreading positive change. Like smiling at someone that you pass on the street, or giving someone a courtesy wave when they let you, I grew up in Southern California, so with the driving, you let someone get ahead of you in the traffic, right? But giving them the courtesy wave, any of that stuff, right? That is spreading positive change that has a ripple effect that you may not ever realize, but by everyone constantly doing those tiny actions, that's what changes the world over time. That's how it's been done in history. I mean, that's how Christianity started, but that's how many movements have started, and it just has to continue that way.
I'm with you. I think it all starts with a single step and a community of people taking those steps together. But I wonder, in these troubled times, these polarized times, these angry times, these fearful times, whether people really believe they can make a difference. People just are resigning. I can't solve it. I can't deal with it. I can't handle it. I'm just going to focus on me. The heck with the rest of the world. The heck with everybody else on the road. The heck with, I don't know that. What do you think? I mean, am I being too negative here, or are we just feeling too overwhelmed and uncertain that we even can make a difference anymore?
Maybe you're overwhelmed, Paul. I got a CBD pill for you. I'm just kidding. So Rick, tell us about this organization you started, I Spark Change. How does somebody? I mean, what's the mission, the vision?
Right.
How does somebody get engaged with it?
Yeah, and in sharing that, Dr. Trin, it will lead right into what Paul was just touching on.
Good.
Is that I agree with you, first off, Paul, that so many of us feel that we can't make a difference, right? That we're too small. We're just one person, right? This great big world of almost 8 billion people, and we're one person. What are we going to do? That's the whole reason I created I Spark Change. Because as I was writing my book and going through this spiritual connection, this period of about 5-6 weeks where I felt God was giving me the story and I was just typing, as I was writing all that, I felt called to do more. I felt like, hey, you need to create this community. That's where the idea of iSpark Change was born. I was having dreams and visions and all these ideas, and iSpark Change was born out of that because I was being called to create a place where people can see that they're not alone. So to your point, where they can be part of the community, where they see that, hey, I can join others and others are going to help support me. And then we're going to make the world a better place. And that's our mission. That's our mission, is to empower the individual, the one individual, empower each individual to spread positive change and elevate their social impact. So they see that, hey, I'm one person, but I am going to make a difference. I can make a difference by doing whatever it is. Like I said, simple things. Whether you work in a nonprofit where you have an organization like Tongue Out and you go across the world and do good, it's all going to affect that global change. And the second part of iSpark Change, it's building that community, but we're building that community because we have huge goals. We want to affect 1 billion people in 5 years.
1 billion people? Wow, that's
1 billion people.
There's a lofty goal.
How we're going to do that is we will morph iSpark Change from an online community into a social media platform, where it is the world's first social media platform that is geared towards connecting individuals that are doing good in the world.
Wow.
You have all these, you have nonprofits, you have organizations, you have individuals, you have groups, you have, all these entities that do good, but they're all fragmented because they all try to make sure that they can do what they're doing in their goals, right? Like Tongue Out, hey, we're going to help people in this country and this trip. And that's phenomenal work. That's amazing work. And we want to support that. We want everyone to be in one place where there can be a doctor on the other side of the world that says, hey, I want to join your community, your organization, Tongue Out, or I want to be a part of what you're doing, or I'm looking for knowledge that I don't have. And someone again, on the other side of the world says, hey, I can help you. I can consult you, give this knowledge for free, donate my time. So that doesn't exist. And that's what we're building iSpark Change to become.
Let me ask one question, then I know Dr. Trin's got more here. I applaud what you're trying to do, because that was the initial intent, the aspiration, the dream of social media, is that it would unite us across barriers around the world, bring us together into virtual communities, and we would connect and we would all grow and we would all support each other and help. Instead, social media largely, not always, but largely has divided us and separated us into these little isolated cells where we just yell at the other cells here. And I don't know why that had to happen. Why isn't there a positive social media platform that says, hey, you want to help? Here's a guy and he needs help and they need help and she's doing this and maybe I can do, and suddenly we're all sparking each other like you're talking about. Why has that not organically occurred anyway? And what kind of reaction are you getting now to your platform?
Well, I'd say the reason is because negative news, the brain reacts to negative news 7 times faster than positive news.
That's right?
Because we've been conditioned that way through evolution, because way back when, 1,000 years ago, if we heard a growl or, loud footprints, we knew we had to freeze, fight, or flight. And so, we've evolved to be conditioned to that negative response. So, and that's what feeds our feeds, right? That's what is fed to our feeds. And right. You see more of it in the algorithms that give you more and more and more and more and more, and it just perpetuates and it snowballs. And so as far as my platform has been extremely well received in the people I've been able to reach, right? We've been able to reach, a couple thousand people so far, and we're growing, and we're growing rapidly. I mean, we keep growing on social media and the different platforms. And what I've found in the past 18 months, connecting with hundreds of people from all over the world, is that there are plenty of people out there that want this type of organization, that have gone through a rebirth or awakening or whatever you want to call it in the past year or so, where they're like, hey, we need to do something. We need to change the world. The world's a better place. COVID was a wake-up call for them, like it was for me. And so I think we're reaching, almost like that tipping point. In history, you look at the pendulum swings so far one direction, and I'm not talking political, but it swings so far in one direction that it swings back, right? And you have out of the Dark Ages came the Renaissance era and things like that. And so I think we're getting there to where it's, swinging so far that we're going to move to where people are like, okay, I've had enough. Now let's start spreading that positivity.
Are we ready to swing to a Renaissance, Dr. Trin?
We're ready to swing. Yeah, we're ready to swing because we're stuck in one spot for too long now in the last year and a half. And so, So are you, how are folks getting connected? Is it a online platform you have now, iSpark Change? Is it
social media site
social
or what?
media or a database of people who do this and that? And how do they connect to each other?
Right.
Yeah. So thank you for asking, being in the early stages, it's mainly through social media. So we have a Facebook group, we have our Instagram, we have our webpage, iSpark Change, the letter I, sparkchange.com, where people can join our community. And so we're just in the early phases of building it. We have newsletter and other things where we're doing to build that awareness and to share with individuals. And we post a ton of inspirational content, motivational content, spiritual content on a daily basis. My team of myself and one other, actually a few others now, there's about 4 of us, but we're doing everything we can to lay the foundations to be able to launch that social media platform. So we're redesigned our website. A new website's going to launch next month in October, and then to be able to be more conducive to growing the community. And then we'll have a phase 2 and a phase 3 to start growing that social media platform.
So let me ask you the question that everybody wants to know, because this is a storytelling platform. This is a storytelling show. Tell us your story of how you had an awakening, why. You mentioned a car accident, some other things here. Take us through that journey, and then we'll talk about some of the other stories you're collecting here, because I think stories are the way we all come together.
Yes, I agree 100%. That stories are what connect us, and that's what makes us one human tribe. Well, as far as for me, so as I was saying, last year when everything shut down, we went in quarantine about March, April, I found myself getting anxious and isolated and really didn't know what to do. I'd lost a bunch of income with things stopping and was a little fearful. And that's not a typical place for me. I'm very optimistic, very positive, don't get stressed, all of that. So I decided to write. So I wrote a blog about using COVID as an opportunity to be grateful, to help others, to serve, and to make yourself a better individual. And then I was like, hey, you kind of need to take your own advice here if you're going to write about this. So I started writing. And the story so now I'll rewind a little bit because you talked about what was like that inspiration. So right. The story for 12 Hours of Heaven came to me 20 years ago. And 20 years ago, I was living in Southern California. My wife and I were living on the Central Coast. And one Sunday, we'd gone down to LA for a birthday party, for a child's birthday party. And we had my 2 daughters, who at the time were 1 and 4. We now have 3 and they're all grown, but they're 1 and 4. And we're coming back and it's evening and we're driving home on the 118 freeway. And I can use these, names because you guys know what I'm talking about.
The 118. Only in California do we say the freeway and say the first, the 405,
exactly.
The 118. Yeah, right.
So we're driving on the 118 and it starts to pour rain. I mean, like it usually doesn't rain in Southern California, but it starts raining like crazy. And cars start pulling over because people don't know how to drive in the rain in Southern California. Oh, no. And we're like, I tell my wife, should I pull over? My car wasn't the greatest tires. And she's like, no, it's going to get dark and then it's going to be worse. So we need to continue on. So I continue very slow in the slow lane. And I hit a large puddle and we start hydroplaning and we start spinning out of control. Oh. And we spin across 4 lanes to the left. And I'm screaming, my wife's screaming. The kids had been asleep. I don't even know if they'd woken up at this time. And I'm trying to correct. And we're about to hit the center divider. And in some way, we don't hit the center divider. And we start spinning the other way, completely spinning, just out of control. And we go off the shoulder and we go up a dirt embankment and we hit a cinder block wall and we flip over and we land on the wheels.
On the wheels, you flipped over and came upright? Oh, geez.
And came upright on the wheels.
Wow.
And the windshield is shattered, and the roof is smushed down to our heads.
Yeah.
And the right side is all shattered, and the glass is all broken, and the car's filled with glass and dirt from, I guess, flipping. And you know, my kids are now crying, and I check them, and they're okay. My wife says she's okay. Just her shoulder from the impact seemed a little sore. And we crawl out of my side, and there's not a scratch on anyone. There's broken glass everywhere. There's not a scratch on all of us.
Wow.
And an elderly couple had pulled over, and it's pouring rain, and the lady wraps this blanket around my wife, who's crying, holding my daughters on the side of the freeway, just thanking God. And I'm talking to the gentleman, and he says, "That's the most incredible thing I've ever seen in my life." Yeah. And they called 911, and he said, "I cannot believe that you're alive and that you got out of that car." And me being a young guy, who's kind of cocky and a new dad and still, full of testosterone, I'm like, yeah, was it that bad? Was it really that bad? And then I go the next day, because they take us in an ambulance, and, my sister comes and picks us up, and our car gets towed away, and we had stuff in the trunk from traveling. So I go to the impound the next day to pick it up, and it's sitting in front of the office on a flatbed, my black Grand Prix. And it looks terrible, right? And completely totaled. And I go inside and I say, "Hey, I'd like to get my things out of out of my vehicle." And he's like, "Well, what vehicle?" And I say, the black Grand Prix that's out on the flatbed. And he's like, "That's not your car." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's my car." And he goes, "No, whoever was driving that is dead or in the hospital."
Gotta be. Yeah.
Yeah. And he goes, "I can always tell by the look of the car." This impound guy. I'm like, "Well, he must know what he's talking about." But I'm like, "But it is my car, right?" And I convinced him my car. And it really caused me to reflect and think, like, when people are like, "That was a miracle, you survived, and God, your guardian angel protected you." And that's where the idea for the book came, because my mom gave me this guardian angel pin for my car, and I put it in the visor.
I've got one too. I don't know why that's such a silly comfort, but I've got a little guardian angel pin that I put on my visor here. Yeah.
Yeah. And my mom gave it and said, "Look, your guardian angel protected you, and guardian angel will continue to protect you." And one day I'm kind of daydreaming and staring up at that, and the story for my book hits me like a movie. And I was like, "Hey, I should really write this. Like, this is a good story." And I start writing like a paragraph, and then I go back to my normal life, and God's timing is always perfect. And I think it didn't come out then because the timing was now that it needed to come out. But that's when last year I was like, "Hey, I need to write that book finally." And that's when I started writing and wrote the book.
And so what is the book? Just give us the summary of the book here. What would we see what would we read if we got one?
So 12 Hours of Heaven, Lessons for a Better World. It's a fictional story about an angel that is sent down from heaven to help others through the biggest challenges of their lives. Mm-hmm. And while it doesn't, address my accident or anything, it does address the angel helping people. And what happens is he finds himself trapped in an elevator with these 10 people, and they're trapped for a period of 12 hours overnight. Mm-hmm. And during that time that they're trapped, he's able to help each one work through a different challenge that they have in their life.
There you go.
Wow.
There you go. That's an interesting idea. Trapped in an elevator. With
yes.
My worst nightmare, the claustrophobic fear of everybody here.
Yeah, for 12 hours. And they go through, a myriad of emotions, and they gain awareness of themselves, and then the angel grows along the way as well. So there's different, there's different lessons being taught in there. And the lessons for a better world are what he helps each of them through, and the solution he gives each of them. So for one, it's to practice gratitude, and one, it's to have faith, and another person, it's to be present, and someone else, it's to serve, and someone else, it's to give, and someone to love. And so he teaches them all these things, which are not new. Like these are not unique. I didn't create all these lessons, right? They've been around for thousands of years. But what I did, and like I said, I feel God gave me a creative vehicle, a story for others to connect to and for others to relate to, and something to inspire people when we were all going through a difficult time last year, and instill, and something to give people some hope.
Wow. So Paul, if you were stuck in an elevator with the angel, what would the angel teach you or tell you?
Ooh, good one.
Clearly, because I tend to be claustrophobic, and my fear is always to get trapped. I don't know why. That's just sends my little squirrel brain running here. You're trapped. You can't get out, like in an airplane or in an elevator or someplace. I'm always feeling I don't know why that's so frightening to me, to feel trapped like that. But it would be that you're not trapped. You're just where you are. You're no more trapped than if you were standing outside. You just have to be in here for a while and accept it. That acceptance is, maybe that's it. Acceptance is hard for me, to just accept this is the way it is.
Acceptance of what? Acceptance of what? The situation of life, of your circumstances?
I'd say all of that, but I want to take charge. I want to have control, and I want to be able to do what I want to do now. I want to get out of this elevator now. Well, you can't for a while. No, I want to. I'm going to. I'm going to figure it out. I'm a alpha male. I'm going to take charge. I'm going to climb up on the elevator and get it going again here. I'm not just going to sit back and say, okay, I'll wait. I hate waiting. I hate wondering. I hate not feeling in control.
Yeah. So acceptance of a loss of control.
Oh,
yeah.
That's what's at the center of what you're saying. What I hear.
I don't like to be. If I'm flying the plane, I can sit in it forever. But if I'm sitting there wondering, waiting, worrying, no, then I got to be in charge of the process. And that's the fundamental fight of my life here, is to let go and let God. Just to follow along. That ain't easy. And because God helps those who help themselves, and we're all taught to be in charge and to think it out and find a solution. There are times there is no solution, and you have to, like COVID, you just have to sit back and enjoy the ride.
So accepting that you're not in control.
That's a big one for me. That's a big one for me.
That's what the angel would teach you in the elevator.
Hopefully. I've been trying to get that list. Maybe I need to get trapped in an elevator, as god awful as that sounds, sir.
That's a good one. And I would say that, a lot of us have been in the same place as you for the past year and a half, Paul. And that's why it's been challenging for people, myself included, right? I'm someone that likes to have control, and that's why it became a difficult time for me when I started writing. And that's something that was forced on all of us. Right. It's one thing if you choose to go on a plane or choose to get in the elevator, but this is something that was just out of the blue, forced on us. So that's what I think made it extra difficult for all of us.
And it was, remind me, wasn't your sister's story that she's a nurse and she was trapped in all this PPE, and she's trapped in the tent outside where they're treating everybody? There's a feeling of being trapped and isolated for all of us during this pandemic that's very uncomfortable.
Yes, absolutely. And I thank you for sharing what you were just sharing about the feeling trapped aspect, because I hadn't really thought that, and God can teach us lessons in so many different ways and give us ideas that are going to benefit others in different ways. But I hadn't really thought of the elevator being that kind of a metaphor for being trapped and not accepting the God. And that's exactly what it is. To
me, that's screaming out. And that's where we're trapped. We're trapped in a reality today that we don't like, and we don't see any easy way out. So we either ignore it or pretend there's no problem. There's no problem here. Or we somehow struggle to overcome it. And that's difficult because we don't feel like I can make it. How can I fight the pandemic? How can I change the situation of the world here? It's out of my control. So you either sit back and accept and say, okay, or you do what you can, which is what I'm hearing your movement is about, do what you can, or it is being angry, or it's denying. Anger and denial seem to be our two go-to reactions when we don't like something. I'm mad at it first, and then I say, I think this is a common problem with our society. I think we go through this, they used to say Pollyanna, this kind of happy talk. Oh, there's no problem here. Everything's okay. Whistling in the dark, oh, no problem here. Everything's fine. This constant need to pretend everything's okay, even though we know it's not. And I don't know that's what children do. I don't know that that's the right answer. Can't we recognize it? can't we choose to accept, accept what we can't change and change what we can?
Yeah. The serenity prayer, right? I mean, that's exactly what you're saying. It's just take control of the things you can. And that's what, at the heart of iSpark Change is that every person can control themselves. Right. You may not control anything else in this world, but you can control yourself, what's in your heart, what's in your head, what you believe. And by virtue of having that, you do have some control, right? Because you can, I was just writing an article last week on what it means, how do you find joy and happiness in turbulent times? And the reality is you can find joy and happiness anywhere, because that's a choice that you choose. Yes. You can choose that I'm going to be happy with being stuck in an elevator, for example, or that I'm going to be happy with, having some tragedy come my way, because of what you'll learn from it, how you'll grow from it, how you'll be better on the other side. Like those are all things. And that's what worked for me in terms of that loss of control, is saying, well, I have control over what's inside here. And so that gave me comfort. How
do you find joy and happiness in spite of your circumstances?
Well, I think it's just making that choice. It's making that choice to, and I like using a technique in psychology called positive reframing, where you take the situation and you say, okay, now I may be looking at this in the most negative viewpoint and saying, this is awful, right? Like I was in a car accident. This is a terrible thing. But taking that and saying, okay, now what are the positives that come from it? You can start really simple. Oh, I get to get a new car, or I get to, my kids are okay. And you look at all these positives, and then you can say, all right, now what are the greater positives that are coming from it? I grew as an individual because I learned from the experience, or I wrote a book that helped others. And you can take any situation, and, psychologists will teach this far better than I will, but, about positive reframing and looking at it in a different light. But that's the technique that I recommend with the people I coach.
And can you reframe it based on the scriptures, based on the promises of God? For example, I think one of the scriptures in the Bible states that all things work for the good of those who love God.
And boy, that's hard to believe. This is good. This is for the good. Oh, come on.
Yeah. So if you took scriptures, and can you reframe it based on the light of the promises of scriptures? Does that help? And
yes, I'd say for sure. I mean, it helps me every day, because I just try to look at things, and this took me a long time to get to this place. And that's why I think God was like, okay, it's going to take you 20 years to figure all this stuff out, because you're nowhere near where you need to be in terms of your faith or whatever, where I was 20 years ago. But the way I look at it is just, that's part of having faith, that it's all part of his plan. It's all part of, the grand master plan, if you will. And that, I love the Steve Jobs quote, which says, you can't connect the dots moving forward. You can only connect them going backwards, right? You can look backwards. And every time I've been in a situation that I thought was horrible, you look back and then you're like, that was great. Like, for example, when we first relocated to Texas, moved from California in 2009 to Texas, and it was with a startup company, a great opportunity, and everything was great. About a year later, the company went belly up.
Wow.
On July 3rd of that 2010, I get the news, you're all being laid off, and no severance, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is horrible. That was not something I looked at positively at that moment. I guarantee that, because I wasn't at the place where I am now. But what happened was, the day after Labor Day, I got a great job that, was excellent for my career and led to a lot of my development and everything. So looking back, I was like, that summer that I didn't have to work and I got to spend with my children was one of the most memorable summers that we had. And we were out on the lake and we were enjoying life, and it was the greatest thing. Now, when you're getting laid off the day before the 4th of July, and we even had an exchange student that was arriving like the next week.
Oh, geez.
And I was like, oh my gosh, how are we going to pay for this? And it was one of the greatest summers, I have in memory. And So that's where you connect those dots backwards and you just trust that, hey, God has a bigger plan. I just can't see it yet. Right. And it will happen.
I'll give you this. I have never put this into a formal plan, or I've given it a name, but for me, what I strive to do, rather, is in the midst of tragedy, in the midst of trauma, in the midst of difficulty, to not become 110% consumed on that one problem right now, which is what you do. You get out of the car, you check, everybody's here, and you don't recognize. At some point, you slowly start to recognize, hey, somebody came and helped me. Wow, somebody wrapped a towel around me. Somebody's going to do this, and there are good things even in the midst of tragedy. Sometimes that brings out not just the bad but the good, because it brings out the good in other people around you to help you, support you, and be there for you and stuff. And if you so consumed on, ow, this hurts, I'm just staring at this, you're not looking at the kindness here. You're not forget about where it goes long term. There are things around you that you have to stick your head up and say, I know this is terrible, but it's great somebody's helping me. It's great that the rain stopped. It's great that I didn't kill anybody else here. You know what I'm saying? There's other things around us, and tragedy tends to focus us because you have to focus in that moment. And so you shut yourself off from everything else around you. And that's what makes it seem even worse. It must be like being in battle. I mean, you're just so focused on the second and being alive and staying here. But suddenly, as they always say, you're bonding with these other people who got your back and helping you. So yeah, we all don't want to be here, and this is awful, and people are dying around us, but there is something else going on. There's a greater humanity helping each other here and fighting to survive. I don't know, is that too weird? But somehow you got to keep the whole picture.
How big or how small our problem is, it's all in here.
Yeah, right.
It's all in here.
Yeah.
You look around and life doesn't change. It just goes on, and the enormity of our worries, right?
Yes.
People say that what you worry may happen is this, right? Is this what you worry may happen is this,
right?
And what actually truly happened is like this, right? It's part of your worry, but in our mind we expand it, and somebody said that what you think on, what you focus on expands.
Mm-hmm.
It's so true. If you focus on negativity, if you focus on the worst of the worst outcomes.
And that's what I was trained to do, though. I don't know about you guys, but I was trained to always prepare for the worst. We're always looking out for the landmines. That's what a man does. That's what a successful person does. You're always anticipating. You're always prepared. You always got backups, and so you go through life like it's one big battle. And so, whereas along the way, you don't stop and rest and just say, oh, a butterfly just flew by. Well, that was pretty nice. I missed the butterfly because I'm so focused on the battle all around me here.
And I think that's just that's kind of a older school way of thinking because of the different generations that we were raised by. You go with like the builder generation or the baby boomer generation, and they're having come out of world wars and all of this. That's what they had to do. So coming into, now when you look at different generations, millennials and Gen Z and everything, we can learn so much from them. And I study them a lot to do work with them. And a big part of what they're doing, which is a beautiful thing, is trying to stop and see that butterfly, right? Stop and smell the roses kind of thing. And not just, and sometimes they may fail in the other aspect because they're not planning ahead and things. And so it's a fine balance that we learn from each other. But I have to share something because as I said earlier, I believe God's timing is always impeccable. And this morning in my scripture in the message,
it may not be acceptable, but it probably is impeccable.
Not to us, but to him. But in the scripture in the message, it said, sometimes we should stop giving our problems to God. And why don't we stop talking to God about our problems. And why don't we start talking to our problems about God? And
Oh,
and I was
wow.
like, whoa, that's good.
How would that work? Now you got me confused. How would I talk
Yeah,
my
so
problem? That
so
car
much of
crash.
us,
Okay, the pain in my hand. I laid off. You just listed a handful of problems here.
yeah, so those you're like, oh God, please take this pain away, please this, please that, please help me through this. When instead of that, going back to Dr. Trin's point, to say, hey, this problem isn't that bad. This problem, God is taking care of this. God is teaching me a lesson from this problem. God has this in control. I just have to have faith in Him. Hey, problem, I see you, and I'm not going to worry about you because it's part of God's plan, and it's not really a big deal.
And I think that to give my elderly late father, who did go through the Depression and World War II and a bomber pilot and all these things, he did maintain this kind of thing. But part of it is be prepared. The Boy Scout motto, if you're prepared, or the Navy SEALs, how can they stay calm under extreme stress? Because they're prepared. They've got it, so they don't freak out and say, oh my God. Instead, calm down, and whether it's God or yourself or however you view this, you're prepared for this. You can handle this. God doesn't give you what we all want to believe. God doesn't give you what you can't handle here. Yeah.
So this preparation isn't necessarily a physical preparation where you're packing 3 years of food and you're buying your gun for the zombie apocalypse.
Right.
This preparation is a mental and emotional preparation,
Right.
Knowing that whatever comes your way, God has already seen it. He's already approved of it. And He has the best in mind for you.
And you can handle it. As overwhelming as you I can't handle this. I can't handle this. Yes, you can.
Yeah. Yeah, and that, you two both said so eloquently there, and I think that's the major point, is that realizing that, like Dr. Trin says, is that God already knows the outcome, and we just have to accept that, and accept that it's going to be part of His plan and what He wants, and that we're, like you said, Paul, that we can handle it. We can handle it. Whether we think we can or not, we will.
Yeah.
And we'll look back and say, hey, we handled it.
And I'm not saying it would be easy. You could be paralyzed after that car crash. I can come up with 1,000 horrible, you could be dead. I can come up with 1,000 horrible things that could have happened and do happen in many of those cases. And we say, I can't handle that. I can't handle that. I can't handle that. You may not want to handle it. You certainly don't want to handle a lot of these things, but we got to believe, whether it's your belief in God or your belief in yourself or whatever it is, that you can rise to the occasion. You can handle it, because people handle the most incredible things. They think, oh, how could I survive that tornado? How could I survive that operation? How could I survive being paralyzed? How could I survive any of these things? You can, and you do. If you're prepared to trust and to work and to do things. We don't just stop in the middle of the street. You could just be still sitting there in the middle of the street crying. Well, you got to get up, you got to move forward, you got to dust yourself off, and but you were mentally prepared for that unexpected trauma. You were spiritually prepared. You were mentally prepared. You had some preparation in place. We have more strength to draw upon than we think we do.
Yeah. And to take us full circle to what, off of what you're saying, preparation, but even going back to where we started our conversation, is that part of that being prepared is to be spiritually prepared. So to be regularly thinking of, hey, God, I'm going to know my scripture. Like Dr. Trin was saying, I'm going to know scripture and know that God is there to help me and everything. And I'm going to take action. I'm going to do my part. I'm not going to stand in the middle of the street. I'm going to take action and get up and move in the direction that I feel He wants me to move into, and not just sit on my hands, right? So that there's definitely stuff to learn.
We used to know, my father's generation, the greatest generation, the World War II generation, used to sort of intrinsically know that in tough times what to do. When you were tested, when it was a choice between stealing or not stealing, between corporations doing something bad or corporations doing something good, between reaching out and helping that person or just ignoring them and looking the other way here. At those moments, they knew what to do, whether it was through their parents training them, whether it was society conditioning them, or whether it was God and listening. They had a belief in God that was much deeper and stronger, I think, than we do today, and a belief in themselves because they'd been through so many traumas. We don't know that we can handle it. That's the slam against millennials. They've never seen terrible trauma, maybe until now. I don't know how to handle these things. We don't have a deep belief in God. We not necessarily believe in ourselves that I can make a difference. And so we tend to just isolate, ignore everything around us, and just try and keep our head down and go through it. And I guess that's a survival tactic, but that doesn't lead to growth, spiritual growth, personal growth. And none of that's possible. And I don't know. I think some of it is just that general, there was a time when you just knew what to do. And I'm not sure people know what to do right now.
Yeah, and hopefully with learning from previous generations, and then new things like iSpark Change to give people a community to learn and help point people in a direction. There's lots of movements and people doing good work around the world, and my hope is that some of these younger generations, and that's why I have that desire, and that's why we've done some work with Gen Z and have another challenge coming up geared towards millennials, coaching wise, is to show them that, to provide them some of those lessons that we've learned from the other generations, and to share some of those tools and tactics so they can, help pass them on, and these things don't become a lost art.
And I think that's the power of what you're doing, because if you show me one person who did it, then I start to think maybe I can too. If you show somebody sparking a change, then if I am the negative, caught in this, I can't make a difference, I don't know what to do, I'm trapped and paralyzed by fear or anger or whatever. If I start to get out of that and see, okay, I don't know if I can change the world, but I can change this right now. It's the famous story somebody told me a long time ago. I'll share this one. I thought this was always a cute one here, or a powerful one. A guy is down in Mexico, let's say, or wherever the turtles come ashore. There's one time a year when all these little baby turtles come ashore and hatch, or I guess they hatch and they all try and run to the sea. And immediately the birds descend on them because they've been waiting, and they start picking them all off. And it looks hopeless. They're all getting eaten, and they're still scrambling to it. And so this tourist picks up one turtle and takes it down to the ocean and puts him in. And the local says, "What are you doing that for? They're all going to die. They're all going to get eaten. You can't save them all." And he says, "But I can save this one right now." There is a choice. You can't save them all, but you can save this one right now. And I think that's what iSpark is all about. I can't change the world, but I can change this right now.
Yeah, and I'd add, Paul, that I love that story. I've heard that story before, and I would add that just by virtue of changing that is changing the world in some small way. Yeah. I would argue that it is changing the world in some small capacity, whether that's realized or not, but it will, and it's just that accumulation of those tiny little actions that make a big difference.
Yes. Is there a blueprint or a roadmap or a step-by-step process?
Dr. Trin's the scientist. He always wants to break it down into steps here.
Yeah. To help someone reframe their mindset and their thoughts.
An exercise, perhaps, to do. Yeah. Like you exercise your body. How can you exercise this spirituality, this growth, this
mindset?
Yeah, so there's a couple different tactics that can be used. What the first one is becoming aware of when your thinking is going, not where you want it to, right? So let's say your thinking is going negative and you want to be more positive, is gaining an awareness of that. And being aware of the moment, that's difficult for a lot of people because, you're in the heat of it. Like Paul was talking about, you're in the heat of it. You just have that tunnel vision, so you can't focus on that. So one thing that I love journaling. And you can journal at the end of the day. I use a journal app in my phone to make it really easy. I journal in the morning written, and then I journal in the evening in my phone to make it easy. But just journal about those experiences. And I always journal and I pray about those experiences that, okay, where did I not live up to God's expectations, right? Where was I negative? Where wasn't I living my best self and everything? And then once you gain that awareness, that would be step one, is to gain awareness of when that happens. Mm-hmm. And as you start to continuously gain awareness and document it and become aware, when you have an awareness of it, then you can start addressing it. And you're like, okay, I'm in this similar situation. Now would be a great time to reframe it and look for the positive in this situation, or look for a better response to this individual instead of that conditioned negative response. Because it's all just conditioning. It's all just brain conditioning. So much of the way we operate as human beings on a daily basis is on autopilot, right? We do so many things on autopilot because that's how our brain is designed, or else we didn't have the brain capacity to do everything. Like if we had to think about every single thing we do in our lives, we wouldn't have the brain capacity to do it. So we do so much on autopilot. So you have to kind of break that conditioning, and you condition it by creating those new habits that are going to make awareness, and then you can start to change the behavior.
So I'm going to reframe what I said. Maybe the word isn't preparation, it's conditioning. Be conditioned to handle challenges, changes, problems. Be conditioned to do the serenity prayer, do what I can do and give the rest to God here. Be conditioned to change. We don't want to be conditioned to change. We like consistency. I don't want anything to change. It's just perfect right now. And then that bump in the road, all of a sudden that wheel goes out of control and the car is spinning and we can't wait to get back to balance. And I can't even think about that anymore here.
I like that.
I tried journaling before. The problem was I went back to read it and I couldn't read my own handwriting.
You're a doctor. You're a doctor.
That's why I type it in my phone, because my writing is like a chicken. Yeah. So I literally just type it or dictate it into my phone, because that way, if I'm not home, if I don't have the journal, whatever, then there's not an excuse. I did that because I didn't want to have excuses as to why I didn't do it. Oh, I couldn't read it. Oh, I couldn't this. I'm like, I always have my phone. I can always just Siri it into the phone, and it's always going to be there.
That's interesting. So you can speak it, and then that turns into...
Oh, you can speak it. It'll type it there, or you can leave an audio message. Like, it's just a journal app. I mean, it's just super simple.
So Dr. Trinh, whether you realize it or not, you've stumbled onto something that we continue to come up in this show, and I continue to wonder and think about, and that is the power of not just thinking of something. We all think all day long, right? We're constantly thinking. And not just to do endlessly, mindlessly, all right, I'm just going to do stuff and be active, and somehow that's going to make a difference. Yes, you got to think. Yes, you got to do. But to take that moment to reflect and to write, to physically or type it, to do something, to force yourself to commit to it and put it on an app, on a piece of paper, in a letter to God, to somehow that act of reflecting and then composing it, writing it, has some sort of magical power to release it and to reframe it and to review it and to recognize things. Do we take time to reflect anymore about anything in such a race?
Yeah. We're always racing and running and to the next thing, that we rarely stop to reflect. And maybe, so I mean, COVID made us all reflect because the world stopped.
World stopped.
Yeah, but I think you're right. We're constantly distracted. We live in like a constant state of distraction with the pings and dings and alerts and social media and news and everything out there, that we don't take that time. And that's actually one of the lessons in 12 Hours of Heaven, is be still. It is practice stillness, is to take the time, a few times a day, even 5 minutes once a day, just to practice stillness. Some people it's prayer, some people it's meditation, some people it's just trying to just clear their mind and breathe, even if you just have to breathe. And that really helps me, because my mind is always just going. Right. But just that time to slow down is very valuable.
Wow, well, I wish we could slow down and keep going, but hey, like life, it's the clock's ticking here, and we got to get to the next thing here. So
what a segue.
So what's your website? it's isparkchange.
Yes, it's the letter I and then sparkchange.com. If you go on Facebook or Instagram and you type in iSparkChange, you'll find it. There's this is the logo for YouTube, but you could see the logo of the individual on top of the world and with the spark above. And iSparkChange on all social media, YouTube channel. As I said, our website, they can join iSparkChange on the website. They can join the Facebook group, follow us on Instagram, and they'll see inspirational content, motivational content, spiritual content on a daily basis.
And don't raging fires start with a single spark?
Exactly.
Wow.
There you go.
I love it. I love the name iSparkChange.
I do too. I like that.
Thank you very much. Hopefully you'll be seeing a lot more of it in the future when we are affecting 1 billion people and connecting 1 billion people.
And it will say, and we were there when it was just a glowing ember. And now it's a raging fire.
Just a glowing ember. Yeah.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on. Give us the name again. iSparkChange on all social media platforms. Dr. Trin, take us out.
Oh, show us your book. Do you have the book in front of you?
I have, if you could see on the wall there's my wife was nice enough to get me that large version of the book.
I see it. Yeah.
I see it. And it's on Amazon? Yes,
it's on Amazon. You search 12 Hours of Heaven, you'll find it on Amazon.
Got it.
What a clever idea.
Thank you. But thank you so much, Paul and Dr. Trin, for having me on. It's been a pleasure to be on Letters to God.
Thanks so much. iSparkChange starts here at OC Talk Radio.
Okay.
Excellent. I love it.
Well, there you have it, folks. Another reason you can make a difference. Starts by tuning in, becoming aware, reflecting a bit, maybe just writing a letter. A letter to God, right here in Orange County's only community radio station, OCTalkRadio.net.